Welcome back. This is the Jade Histories Episode 1. Few CCGs have lasted the test of time. Only 4 have lasted 20 or more years in print as a CCG. Many of you know of the 3 still currently in print. Magic the Gathering, 1993 to today. Pokemon, 1996 until today. Obviously that counts as Japan. And Yu-Gi-Oh! 1999 to today. This series, called the Jade Histories, will be exploring the greatest story in gaming, The Legend of the Five Rings collectible card game, 1995 to 2015. The world met the land of Rokugan at Gen Con 1995. They had a set that was given out at Gen Con, and it is listed as Pre-Imperial. It's an 84 card set of cards that also appeared either in Emperor Edition or later expansions, but it had some cards that had some changes. Obviously, that's pretty typical in a collectible card game. When you're printing something before your first print run, many of these changes happen during playtesting, and that's fairly typical. For example, L5R veterans will look at this card and say, this card isn't right. Well, in Pre-Imperial, Matsuture had these stats and ability and flavor text. But players that have actually played the game know that this card was changed. The artwork was used for Matsu Yojo. Yep, and that's going to bury the other one in the wrong spot. And the game text, 1, 3, 5 honor requirement, 6 gold cost, 3 personal honor. That game text and stats was used on Matsu Gohei, the butcher. Now, obviously, there were other characters. The pre-imperial version of Shinjo Hanare. So the name and ability and stats and everything are the same here. But this artwork was not used on Hanare. They switched to this artwork, and they used the artwork on Shinjo Yasamura. And then lastly, this is the Imperial Edition version of Tagashi Yoshi. Notice particularly the gold cost box in the center. In Pre-Imperial, he was 3 gold and had a different honor requirement. And changes like that typically happen in any playtest process. Now, I want to flip back and forth here for a minute. You'll notice on the pre-imperial version of Togashi Yoshi, there is a thin border around or on the outside of the frame. It's a solid yellow, red, orange border. During the old days of the game, before anybody thought of collector information or rarity or any of that other stuff. Um, there's very little of anything to distinguish what set this card's from. They used a thin frame or a thin border around the frame of the card to distinguish from one set to another. You do have an illustration or an illustrated by on the side, which is hard to read. Old cards were old cards. But if you go back to, this is the Imperial version. This frame is now, instead of a solid line using those colors, it has sections that have been cut out, so or dashed line, and that was the major distinguishing feature. They also changed the text of the artist credit to black. They continued to do this through the Spirit Wars expansion, and during Gold Edition they actually changed the frames, went through a change in Pearl Edition. This old school frame was abandoned and they went to something that was clearer and more legible. But they added copyright date, rarity, put the illustrator's name on the bottom line of the card, put a code for what set it was, and abandoned this exterior frame type piece to tell you what set it was from for the remainder of the game, with a couple of small exceptions. Alright, so let me turn the overhead camera on. Obviously I still have lots and lots and lots of old cards. You'll notice here that this is a Imperial Edition clan deck, and it has the same frame around it as does the frame of the card we got. Now, the reason I brought this up is on the side there is a story, Sacred Temple of the Phoenix. Of all the clans, Phoenix best understand the mysteries of the five rings. The elemental masters are the most powerful in Rokugan. They prefer peace and solitude to the madness of war, and will do what they can to bring the violence to an end. Quote, "You cannot conquer the elements. You must learn to dance with their harmony." The Tao of Shinsei. This was quite commonplace in starters. They would have some story information or some details about what the faction did, which was very unique. Now, there's a term that gets floated around in Legend of the Five Rings a lot. There's the term box and the term boxable. And for clarification, I want to explain where those words came from. During the early years of the game, your starter deck had your clan stronghold printed on the back of it. As you notice here, this is the Sacred Temple of the Phoenix. 5 province strength, 3 gold production, 6 starting honor. Bow at any time to reduce the gold cost of a Shugenja or spell by 5 gold until the end of the turn. So when you bought a starter deck, your stronghold was printed on the back of it. So the term box meant stronghold, and the term boxable meant any personality that could be paid for by just bowing your stronghold. The Phoenix had a particular advantage where they could pay for any Shugenja. So this was their spiritual priests that basically could communicate with the kami, allowing them to channel some of the kami's power through them, basically being a vassal. You could almost call it a shaman, if you will. But a boxable for the stronghold would be anybody that you could pay 5 gold for or less. I wanted to get that term out of the way because you'll hear that used a lot in the game's circles. I'm going to flip back now. So there are a number of important cards, whether that is for story reasons or for in-game reasons. There was a cycle of 5 dragons that referenced each of the 5 elements that the game spoke about. Douglas Schuler, who many players at the time knew his accolades as a magic artist, did a number of pieces of artwork for this set. There was a large contingency of folks: Anson Maddox, Quentin Hoover, and then you have Matthew D. Wilson, who was the art director. Also did a number of pieces for this set and sets going forward. Of course, many of you know Matthew Wilson now as the owner of Privateer Press Games. We're going to go over the ones that were powerful, used in a lot of gameplay, particularly during this era of the game, as well as ones that include story information that might be relevant. Again, we have the Air Dragon here. Oops. 7 force. Most of the strongholds in the early part of the game had a very low province strength. 5 and 6 were the majority of the statistics, so anything that was 7 force or greater could easily take a province by itself. 10 honor requirement, 10 gold, and 4 personal honor. The stats locations never changed on the card, even when the frames did. Everything stayed the same. So basically the Air Dragon couldn't be targeted by ranged attacks or spells. It was like, I'm just going to disappear, and made it quite powerful when you could play it. Sorry, let me check. Koto Kage. So from a story perspective, Kage was one of the more important characters in the early part of the game, particularly because of his status as the Akoto clan sensei. He trained the former clan champion of the Lion, Akoto Tuturi, who has now been banished by the he was the new emperor. Basically said, for your failure to protect my brother during the Scorpion Clan coup, because he was poisoned by the Scorpion, he forced him to commit seppuku, and Tuturi walked off and said, I'll be cast out as a Ronin then. So Akoto Kage is the only is the last Akoto, if you will, which leads into a prophecy that says, when the last Akoto falls, so falls the last Hantai. Hantai was the Imperial line, going back to the day when the Kami fell from the heavens to earth. So Kage sort of has some interesting plans moving forward. Speaking of the aforementioned, Tuturi was poisoned by his lover, who was a geisha. Her loyalty was supposed to be to the Scorpion Clan, but instead of giving him a lethal dose, she gave him enough where he would just be knocked out, and he woke up several days later and confronted Bayushi Shoju, who killed Hantai the 38th, and held the throne room for 3 days. And you can see, obviously, they gave this the lion frame, which is incorrect, obviously. They corrected that the next set. But at this point, he is an unaligned samurai. Double chi, which means when he is in duels, cards that he would raise his chi are doubled, basically. He enters play, you lose 5 honor, and enters play dishonored. Because obviously he should have committed seppuku, he didn't. He will not join a crab or a phoenix house. If he's restored to honor, you gain 5 honor, and then he gains +2, +3 permanently. So it becomes a 6/5. This was basically designed as a top-down card, showing that he had been dishonored for his failure. Now, note, this is the original storyline of the CCG. This has nothing to do with the storyline by Fantasy Flight Games in the LCG. They completely rewrote not everything, but a lot of stuff because of because of issues of certain tropes being not great. Obviously, the original version was written by John Zenzer, John Wick, Dave Williams, none of which are of any Asian descent whatsoever, and this was a group of sort of a hodgepodge of Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Mongolian. All these cultures were kind of wrapped in together. So be aware of that. Next up is the ancestral weapons. Each of the starter decks came with one copy of the unique weapon. And during the first 6 years of the game, these cards were super expensive. Particularly later when these went out of print. I remember buying a set of these right before what would have been my first Kotai, and I bought a set of them at $50 a piece for the 6, so it was $300. And obviously anybody that was missing one, we split it between us. Why they were so powerful? When controlled by that clan's personality, gets +1 force, +1 chi bonus for each of that personality. When you play it, you gain 4 honor. If the other player is of the same clan, they lose 6 honor. That is a 10-point honor difference. And that is absolutely a huge amount. Particularly in specific matchups with the honor clans. When it's an honor runner versus an honor runner, the first person to get this was darn near won the game. Now, in those days, unique cards were 1 per deck, and if another player has played their copy of the unique card, the other player cannot play that copy. So the first person to get to the unique copy is at a huge advantage. Each of the clans had a sword for the 6 that were in this set. All of them had 4 focus value. We'll get to what focus value is used for, but this is typically used for certain stat checks and dueling and things of that nature. Alright, next up we have Avoid Fate, and this particular piece of artwork, this is the only time this piece of artwork was ever used. I don't know, not exactly sure why, but this was an important card type because you got to delay events from happening. Events were unique one-time cards that when they are revealed during the events phase of the game, you got to resolve in order from left to right. As you start with a game with 4 provinces, you reveal from left to right. You get to reveal and execute what's on the event card. There in the early part of the game, this was really the only way to stop an event or temporarily hold it off. So it was very important, particularly for as events became more powerful effects. So this was Bayushi Kachiko. Was I guess one of the she played a very important role in this story. She was the former wife of Bayushi Shoju, the Scorpion Clan champion, who died after the coup. The Emperor Hantei the 39th basically disbanded the Scorpion, if you will, for their role in the coup, and he took Bayushi Kachiko as his concubine. Not really. I don't think he really took her as his wife, because he wanted control over her. Now, this piece of artwork is by Matthew Wilson. He has many iconic pieces of artwork in this set. Obviously, the use of the seductress term and some of the story precedents that they used was probably not great now looking back upon it, but she was a very important character in the story and the setting. She has been, and the story booklet for Imperial Edition goes over this, but she has been she's been poisoning the Emperor, and she's making it. There has been a plague that has opened up in the Empire. We'll get to that in a little bit, but she has been slowly poisoning the Emperor, sort of part of her revenge for the death of her husband and the banishment of her clan. And that's what her ability here is. Probably, if this card was remade today, it would probably be a poison token instead. As far as gameplay goes, Block Supply Lines was one of the best defensive cards in the game. Rewording this as it would be worded today, it's move one attacking unit home from this battle bowed. In the early days, they didn't have a lot of lore to use on the flavor text, so it used a lot of Sun Tzu from the Art of War. Defensive decks played this card from every set that this card was legal in. Very effective. Now, strategy cards, or action cards as they were called back then, if you were going to take an action or play a strategy, you had to have two things. You had to have presence, which meant you had to have somebody at the battle to execute your strategy, actions, orders, whatever you want to call them. And the rule of location, which meant either somebody already had to be at that ability, either already had to be at that location, or it had to move a person from wherever they are to that battlefield for you to be able to play it. So it wasn't a perfect solution, but it was still a pretty good one. Blood Sword. So this card referred to the Miramasa blades that were supposedly bloodthirsty and haunted. The story team created a backstory about 4 particularly forged weapons that apparently could take over the mind of the person who wielded them. And as you can see here, it got bigger every time the person won a duel. From a +1/+1 to +3/+3, the next time +5/+5. So it just kept getting bigger and bigger. This was a menace against those early dueling decks. But during the early days, there weren't a lot of attachments that were played. It had to be really good, or like the ancestral weapons, gain you a ton of honor or hurt your opponent. Breach of Etiquette. Player with the highest family honor commits a public breach of etiquette and loses 5 honor. So this card was the bane of every player during the early 6 years of the game. So, like we had with the Lion Clan, you had a lot of guys that had high honor requirements, 5, 6. Some of the other clans has the same problem. So if your opponent, who's playing a low honor clan, starts, your opponent has their first turn, you have your first turn, and you play breach, you could essentially lock a player out of the game from being able to play any more personalities because they couldn't meet their honor requirement. Now, obviously, they finally learned that that was probably not the right way to do things, and they eventually looked at designing cards that were better. Like, you get to lose the honor, but any rest of the game, all your guys has no honor, has a dash for honor requirement, which means it doesn't matter what your honor is, they'll join you anyway, which was very important. But I mean, this card locked players out of games, so it was vehemently hated by a lot of players. So just like Magic or most other games where there is combat of some sort, you're going to have pump effects. Charge was a lion card. It worked with any attacking personality, or you get an additional force bonus if you play it on a Lion Clan dude. Now events. Chrysanthemum Festival. So this one is very important for honor decks. They want to see more cards. They also want to make sure that they don't get all their provinces destroyed before they win by honor. And so this was a pretty critical event for them. Even if they gave your opponent more cards to see, it was worth it for them. So there was a cycle of cards in the set that was used for the majority of the game's history that players referred to as clan holdings. So the copper mine was cost 2 and vowed to produce 2 gold, but if it's controlled by a member of the Lion House, Lion Clan, whatever, it produces 3 gold. So you got a bonus if you were playing that faction. We'll run into them as we go down, but for every clan, they got a... Alright, maybe I shouldn't say every clan. But every faction had a clan holding that gave them a bonus if you were playing that faction. Counterattack. This was the basis for many a wild swing in the gosh, let's see, counting Gold Edition was probably the first 8 years of the game. So basically, after you get attacked, you could play this and then declare any number of attacks against your opponent. You don't have this type of effect in most other games, so it's really unique to see this happen. Most of the military decks like to play this and hope they don't have a rallying cry. We'll get to rallying cry farther on down the list. But being able to swing back on your opponent's turn, destroy something or some things, and then get your straightener on tap phase and swing at their other provinces could really swing a game. Yeah, this was interesting. Alright, so this game had a specific card type called a terrain. And basically, there could only be one terrain in play at each battlefield. If a player got to play their terrain before you got to play your terrain, you either had to have a way to destroy it, or you're going to be stuck dealing with the effects of it. Now, the one terrain that was played the most during, I would say through the end of Gold Edition, is Deadly Ground. So basically, you play this card when you have more force than your opponent, and this card basically locks them out from doing any action until they destroy this terrain. So if they can't destroy this terrain, the battle is over, and whoever had higher force when you played it wins. That's the reason you played yours. If you had higher force, you played yours first. Eventually, they got to the point that they rotated this out of the game in Diamond Edition, and it actually opened up where more people could play terrains. There were some that were played more than others. I particularly liked at the end of the game, they basically said where all terrains had the ability that said, we'd let you play the terrain and destroy all of the terrains at the battle. So you used your terrains to actually destroy the other terrain, which I think was actually a neat design choice. This is probably one of my favorite arts all time. So this is Doji Hotari, the Crane Clan champion. And this particular artwork, this is also a Douglas Schuler artwork, is typically referred to as Darth Hotari. And you can probably tell because of the Mempo face mat, the Mempo, and then the red glowing eyes. Kind of has a Darth Vader look to him. He's particularly important in the story because he is having a love affair with Bayoshi Kachiko, and there's also some other backstory from the Scorpion Clan coup that happened. They had a love child together that only Kachiko knew about, and Hotari did not. And Hotari accidentally killed he killed the Scorpion, and Kachiko didn't forgive him for that until she was at almost on her end, and there are some things that she's going to do to Hotari to tarnish his name. But this artwork and this ability was a complete badass. Dragon of Fire. So, yeah, 14 gold was a lot. 14, 15 gold, a lot of your champion personalities. And particularly in this era, they had some really strong abilities. So you could do 2 ranged 5 attacks, or you could do 1 ranged 10 attack, which is there's a really strong. You're gonna fry whatever you're hitting, basically. The Earth Dragon. This is a Matthew D. Wilson piece of artwork. This is an amazing piece here. 7 force, but it's a 12 force while defending. You're not getting past it. The Emperor's Peace. So nobody gets to attack during your turn and your opponent's turn. Great in defensive honor decks. Great in enlightenment decks. Even good in dishonor decks. Entrapping terrain. So if you weren't running Deadly Ground, you were running entrapping. Entrapping basically ends the battle without resolution, and all units go home unbowed because they can't slog through the terrain, basically. So your defensive decks were using it. Mostly this is going to be your honor and dishonor. Enlightenment, I can't ever remember running it in my enlightenment deck, although I think it's, not outside the question. Evil Feeds. So this was one of the earliest salt cards, or salty cards, if you will. So if you revealed this, and whatever player had lower honor has to destroy their rightmost province. So in this case, of the strongholds in this set, the Lion Clan was tied with the Phoenix Clan for the highest starting honor of 6. Everybody else was below. And flipping this on the first turn really tilted a lot of people, just like the first turn breach of etiquette. So this card was hated for a lot of reasons. But having it in your deck was a danger, because if you went against Dishonor and you didn't flip this on the first turn, there's a very good chance that they'll be able to drop your honor below what their honor is, and then you get hit with your own event. This card was so good, they only printed it 3 times. Evil Portents, all Shadowlands cards in play get +1/+1 until end of turn. On other personalities, get -1/-1 until end of turn. So the Shadowlands was the real bad guys, and anybody with the Shadowlands trait got a bonus. Anybody who didn't suffered the penalty, and that penalty could easily kill multiple personalities. So personalities that had 1 chi or 2 chi normally didn't see 3 played on the same turn, because in this game non-uniques had a maximum of 3 copies. But if you had 1 or 2 chi, there was a very good chance that you could have multiple personalities die to evil portents. So be aware that exists and plan accordingly. Fiend Death lets you keep your dude, but they lose all their followers, and you have to lose a little honor. So the honor loss was both flavorful as well as a detriment. Frenzy. So this is the Crab's version of the force bonus that we saw with Charge. The difference here is a personality must become dishonored, and all attached followers are destroyed at the end of turn. So they'll get to keep one for now, but they're going to blow up at the end of turn, and they have to lose 2 honor. So you have to take a hit to use it, but it was still quite strong. +3 for a crab, +2 for anybody else. These cheap, free force pumps ended up seeing a lot of play. And there's more. Gennawa. So Gennawa was also a member of the Akoto family. He failed to protect his lord, and he is also seeking revenge. We will Gennawa again is another personality that's ingrained in the lore of this game. And he's very important to Tuturi, as we will find out later as well. Alright, so another clan holding. This is Goldmine for the Dragon Clan. Hideyaka Mo. 6 force, 1 chi. 7 gold, Crab Clan Berserker. Can't have armor. he's destroyed unless his army has more than twice the opposing army's force. This was one of the big reasons that Crab were doing well in the early days. 6 force for 7 gold is quite good. And considering you don't have to pay 7 based on the rules back then, you could pay 2 less gold and not gain their honor. He has 0 honor. What's the point? So he's 6 force, 5 gold. Now, obviously, that 1 chi is a detriment in Shadowlands matchups, so beware that you could die in a moment's notice. But yeah, him in a frenzy, 9 force is pretty dumb. One of the badasses, Kasada. So Kasada is the strongest of the clan champions in force. He, if I'm not mistaken, he has the lowest. Maybe not the lowest personal honor, but he can't be targeted by Shugenja spells or innate abilities. Kasada is important because for a number of reasons. One, he gives he blindly listens to a character that we'll talk about here in a little bit. That basically allies his clan to the Shadowlands, and several bad things start happening. The other important piece about Kasada is his decision to not back Bayushi Shoju at the Scorpion Clan coup meant that the coup ended up being unsuccessful overall. Had Kasada backed Shoju, there's no telling if the coup would have the chances of the coup failing would have probably not. So he had a big to-do about that. Sakune is one of Kasada's children. He has 2 sons and a daughter. We're about to meet his other son here momentarily. Sakune is tried to warn Kasada of the weird things that's happening, and it doesn't seem like he's listening. So we'll see what happens to our intrepid personality. And now we're going to meet 2 sides of Hideyaka Mo. So you'll notice Yakumo is wielding a Tetsubo, and he has a claw on his left hand. So he lost a duel to another character, and in that duel he lost his left hand. A claw that you see on his that has replaced his left hand was given to him by the same character that Kasada is trusting, that's now allied himself with the Shadowlands. And so because the claw itself is now attached and siphoning some of Yakumo's power away, we now have Hideyaka Mo, the Oni. And these two will later fight one another. But in the meantime, this is one of the personalities in the early crab deck that became extremely potent because of the force chi bonus that it got from other Crab Clan personalities. IJutsu Duel and IJutsu Challenge, these are the next two cards. So Challenge, I'll let you do a number of dumb things. If you won the duel, you killed the loser and you gained 5 honor. If they refused, they become dishonored and lose 7 honor. Now those numbers are humongous. And they learned eventually that those numbers need to be dialed back a little bit. So how do you duel? I'm going to go back to Yakumo for a second. Duels, by default, were a challenge of your chi. So you take your printed chi plus any cards that's attached to it that increase or decrease the chi. And then each of you can focus from your hand, and this goes back and forth until somebody decides that they wish to strike. When they strike, they reveal all cards that were focused, because all focuses are face down, and you add up the focus values and add that to your chi, and the winner has the highest between those numbers. It was very different for that time period, and it's still a unique mechanic on how those are resolved today. IJutsu Duel was a battle duel that could not be refused, and the winner gained 5 honor. This is one of Quentin Hoover's pieces of artwork for the set. He has a number of pieces. This one's a little muddled compared to the other ones, but I wanted to point out his artwork. Obviously, we know he left us a few years ago now, and he's certainly missed in the art community. Imperial Gift. This one was pretty standard in a lot of decks. You gain 2 honor. You search for an item card from your deck, reveal it, add it to your hand, and reshuffle your fate deck afterwards. I can't tell you how many formats. I don't know any format that I probably wouldn't play this card. It was very useful, either to get your clan sword or another important piece of equipment. And inheritance. So free gold is a recurring problem in L5R. This card individually produces 5 gold, and you have to spend all this on 1 card. But flipping this on the first turn of the game lets you do stuff like you can buy your stronghold to pay for a holding, and then you could spend the 5 gold in inheritance to buy a personality or second holding on the first turn, which puts you ahead on tempo. And in the early days of the game, tempo was very important. Iris Festival. All Shadowlands cards in play are destroyed. Shadowlands player hated this card. It was basically a card designed to absolutely wreck them. And yeah, I guess you could say it was controversial. As I recall, I don't. There were some cards that you could play that would destroy one of another card, but to destroy all of them was, and usually this being a one-sided destroy everything, was very bad. So it certainly sucked to be on the other side of this. This is the Crabs clan holding. Now we're going to get into the Elemental Masters. So this is Isawa Kaede, Master of the Void. She is particularly, she's important to the story for multiple reasons. Kaede was betrothed to Tuturi before he, while they were young, before he met his fate of becoming a Ronin. She's going to play a particular role in the story throughout the rest of Tuturi's life. She's one of the few Phoenix that decides not to dabble in some of the dark arts, which is very important to their end of the story. We have Isawa Tadaka, Master of Earth. Isawa Tomo, Master of Water. Isawa Suke. So Suke is the Master of Fire. Another Quentin Hoover piece of artwork. I think this is beautiful work. I think Suke is the thinks he's the most powerful. So we'll see how far he rises or falls. Then we have Isawa Uano, Master of Air. Come across our first unicorn personality, Ayuchi Karasu. So he is important. He's going to be important later on, but he has the nickname the Doom Seeker, and you'll find out why as we go through the story portion. Movement is definitely a unicorn trait, and so now I'll tell you, I don't think this ability got used nearly as much as it should. If he was printed later on, I could see this getting used a lot. Jade Works, this was a standard 3-for-3 holding, but if you could bow it to produce 5 gold when paying for a Jade card. And back in these days, there was a rulebook rule called the Fu rule, which meant if the card's title has a word in it that matches the game text, so Jade Works, you're paying for a Jade card. Instead of it having a trait line, Jade Works counts as a Jade card, so you'd actually produce 5 gold when buying this Jade Works. Later on, they corrected the wording and actually gave it traits as it should have had, to clean up things. But this was a pretty standard holding for a lot of decks, especially in this era. This is probably the piece of artwork that Quentin Hoover was most known for in L5R. He did Kakita Toshimoko, the experienced version of Kakita Toshimoko, and Walking the Way, which we'll get to later in this. Seven chi is enormous, and unless your opponent's doing something crazy, he ain't beating that. And he had a built-in ability to challenge somebody. If they refused, they're dishonored. But you lose 5 honor if you lose a duel, so be real careful. Kiren, so this was is a mythical creature. It's not very powerful, but it's mostly its game text is what's relevant. Personalities with personal honor 0, 4, or 5 may not attack your provinces while Kiran is unbowed and honorable. No gold cost, 5 personal honor, and 15 honor requirement. And what's this? It's a Kolat card. So Kolat was the secret organization that was trying to bring down the end of the reign of the kami and bring about the age of man. They wanted to be ruled by a human, not a god, and they had been in hiding for 800 plus years. This was the earliest way for them to a limited phase or action phase, destroying personalities. Somebody that had chi less than 4 or destroy any retainer. This is a particular type of holding that is basically a retired person that doesn't fight but helps you do other things on the sidelines, like an advisor or strategist, etc. So this was an original card to basically terror, if you're a Magic player, destroy personality. And this is how you steal somebody. Both of these cards were used as control mechanisms. So this is the shady looking guy that Kasada was listening to, and Kuniyori was the one that got the claw for Yakumo after he'd had his hand cut off. And there would be more that goes on. So the Kuni was the family of the crab that were Shugenja, and they typically were the ones that researched the creatures of the Shadowlands. Unfortunately, because they had to do so much research, they found it very easy to be corrupted by that information. So he will become important again shortly. Kyoso no Oni. 5 force, 5 chi for 7 gold is ginormous. Can't have any followers or items, and you have to blow up a holding when you bring it into play. That's a steep cost, but that's a big body and has a range 7. She would be a pain in the arse for quite a long time. There's the Cranes clan holding. Mary's a barbarian, so this was a cheap, easy way to dishonor a samurai. Eventually, they rotated this card out because it was either not effective, it was non-effective because they didn't have samurai in their deck, or it was too effective. So it eventually left and got rotated out. Matsu Agataki. This was just a very big-bodied Lion Clan samurai. Now, cavalry. So, the way cavalry worked is each player assigns their non-cavalry units to a battle. Then your opponent does the same. Then you assign your cavalry units, and then your opponent does the same. So basically, by assigning last, it makes the cavalry seem faster. Eventually, because that made it very non-interactive early, for longer periods of time, they changed the way those worked, where it was more of a movement ability, which made a lot more sense long term. And there's the butcher, Matsugohei. So between Gohei, Charge, another card we're going to get to here shortly, and the Stronghold for the Lion Clan, it made blitzing your opponent very easy, and why he was among some of the most hated personalities in the game if you weren't playing Lion. Also, William O'Connor, who did this artwork, God rest his soul, this is probably the piece of artwork that most people think of when they see William O'Connor, because he was there from this day forth. Matsusuko. So Matsusuko was when the Akodo were name was stripped from them because Tuturi decided not to commit seppuku. The Matsu were put in charge of the Lion Clan, and Matsusuko was brash, and basically, the keyword, or not the keyword, the flavor text. There's no loyalty but to the Emperor. There's no honor but to die in his name. Blindly following a leader is definitely going to be a challenge here. So the duel that Hideyaka Mo was in, where he lost his left hand, was against Minamoto Hitomi. This is another famous Matthew Wilson artwork. Hitomi and Yakumo have a long-standing rivalry between the two of them. We're going to be revisiting that quite a number of times throughout the Jade Histories. Ninja Shapeshifter. So I get 2 force, 2 chi for 10 gold is ridiculously expensive for this guy. But being able to copy force, chi, personal honor, or ability of any one personality in play until on the turn is really good. A lot of fun stuff you can do with this guy, particularly when you get to play him for 4 gold, basically. Ninja Stronghold lets you pay the full cost of a ninja card, with the exception of it doesn't pay variable costs. So as long as it either had the ninja trait or ninja in the name, this could pay for it. And just about every there were a couple of decks that got to use that a lot We'll see them later in the archives. Ninja Thief. So you basically get to steal an item from one of your opponent's personalities and put it on one of your personalities. This was particularly useful against the ancestral swords, because if your opponent had played theirs and you're of the same clan, you can't play yours, so you can just steal theirs and put it on your dude. You get the same bonus, except for the honor gains and losses. And if your opponent is on another clan, you get to basically steal it and put it on one of your guys and nullify all the bonuses that they got. It was an effective countermeasure, if you will. Ogre Bushi. One of the few Shadowlands creatures that you did not lose honor for. 6/4 for 9 gold is quite big. And even one that Kasada is impressed with. This character got borrowed and used in many decks, even if it did have the Shadowlands trait, and I'll discuss that in a minute. So let's talk about our province eater. Oni no Akuma, 6 force, 3 chi, 0 gold cost. Unique. When he's brought into play, it destroys the province from which it was played. So he eats one of your provinces, and then you go across and start eating one of your opponent's provinces. Back then, a majority of you had 2 strongholds that had 5 province strength, 2 strongholds that had... No, you had 3 that had 5 strength, you had 2 that had 6 strength, and you had 1 that had 7 strength. So against half the clans, you got... Akuma could come across by themselves and eat a province. Against the other 3, you would need some sort of force bonus for him to take it by itself, or follower or something. He was he was Bane, but he had an experienced version later on that was even more powerful than this, even though it did cost gold. Oni no Subaru. I'm still waiting for Oni no Toyota. I don't expect to see that one, unfortunately. So 2/2 for 4 gold. It has cavalry, that's important. No followers or armor. You have to destroy a personality when Subaru enters play. It gains a 6 force bonus at the end of a battle, before the battle resolves, if there are no defending units against him. So basically, if there's no defending units, which he's cavalry, he's 8 force for 4 gold. There's a particular personality we're going to talk about here shortly that he got to eat a lot of. And one that eventually they memed and did everything else with. Otaku Kamoko. So this was another personality that was seen in Blitz-style decks in the early part of the game. The Unicorn Stronghold, which we'll see here shortly, produced 5 gold, and with the cost reduction, you could bring Kamoko into play for 5 gold, and while she's attacking, she's 4 force instead of 3 force. So there's a pump, another force bonus you'll see here shortly, where she could take almost every stronghold by herself. or province, against every clan. She is important to the story. She's trying to find her killer, her mother's killer. She's very brash and impatient, but she soon finds out that she has a very important duty to do as well. I won't spoil who her mother's killer is, but we've already seen the card. I've already showed the card in this slideshow so far. Peasants Revolt, so this is another cheap mechanism to keep high force military decks from swinging in. Shuts them down for another turn and allows you to either dishonor or honor, or maybe even enlighten, work on some more of those. Proposal Piece. So this is anti-honor. It keeps your opponent from, keeps any player from proclaiming. Well, you can proclaim, you're just not going to get any honor for it. But shutting off a very easy way to gain honor was important. So Rallying Cry was typically played in all military decks. And so counterattack, which we spoke about earlier, what would happen after a battle ended, if your opponent played counterattack, you then have a window to play Rallying Cry and make sure that all your guys that you just attacked with are unbowed. So when they swing at you, you actually have units to defend with. But this was a card that I don't know if it wasn't played in a 3 of in any military deck. The entirety of its run in play through the end of Gold Edition. Now we get to the Elemental Rings. All 5 of these are a panorama, if I remember correctly, by Matthew D. Wilson. They each have the kanji for each of the elemental ring, each of the elements. So to win the game by enlightenment, you had to play 1 copy of each of the elemental rings. So you had the Ring of Air, which you could play after producing 3 spell effects or innate abilities. So spell effects at this point in time were spells that were Shugenja could play. Keyhose, which didn't come into play for a few more sets, that could be played by a monk or Shugenja, and innate abilities were printed abilities on Shugenja. For air, you got to redirect an effect. Earth gained +3 province strength to all your provinces. Fire, your opponent had to focus cards face up in duels. Ring of the Void, you played this when your hand is empty and this is the only other card in your in your hand, and at the beginning of your end phase you draw 4 additional cards, or 5 cards total, instead of drawing just 1 if your hand's empty. This would get abused quite a bit. And then the Ring of Water, for this card, the benefit was you could just assign your your units after your opponent's units. So your opponent would have to assign infantry defenders before you assign infantry attackers, and then your opponent would have to assign cavalry defenders before you assign cavalry attackers. Really messed up a lot of things. These were tricky to pull off, and only a few decks could ever play all of these. If I remember correctly, Earth and Void were played the most. Sanctified Temple was a baseline 4 gold cost, 2 gold production, or you can bow this, pay 2 gold, and gain 2 honor. Secrets on the Wind. This is a spell. Notice the scroll. 3 gold cost, 3 focus value. When you play this, you put a token on it for each point of chi on your Shugenja, and then you can bow the Shugenja and destroy a token to dishonor personality. A slightly newer version of this card was when the Scorpion Clan was introduced to the game as a playable faction. You didn't actually remove a token from this if the Shugenja was Scorpion, which made it ultra powerful for their dishonorable effects. Speaking of dishonor, shame. Play on a dishonored personality. That player loses 7 honor. This is a very quick way to have your honor drugged through the dirt. And so this card was very important to dishonor strategies. It was also another way to lock your opponent out of the game. Simply refusing an IJutsu challenge loses you 7 honor, dishonors the personality, and then they can immediately play shame on the next time that they have the action to lose another 7. Loss of 14 honor in 2 cards was a little bit much, but you have to understand the risks, especially in that day and age. So this is the Phoenix Clan champion, Shiba Uchimitsu. But there's one problem. Uchimitsu was actually printed without the unique trait. He is the only clan champion up until the late, I think the Ivory edition. He's the only Phoenix Clan champion that's printed without the unique trait. He's the only champion to have a clan champion version to not have the unique trait. After they noticed the mistake, they actually left it off. They never changed it. But basically, when it dies, you can shuffle them back into your deck, showing the Phoenix recursion, death and rebirth. Shinjo Yokatsu. This is the Unicorn Clan champion. He has an effective role to play that involve our friendly secret society. So we'll be talking about Yokatsu in a little bit later. So he actually has the Tactician trait. Tacticians can, as a battle action, once per battle, discard a fake card from their hand and give this personality a force bonus equal to the focus value. So he could solo a province without the need of another attachment. Here's the Phoenix Holding. Small farm. So 0 gold cost, bows for 1 gold. There was a lot of big debates with small farm and free gold. I don't necessarily think small farm is a card that's problematic. but almost every other free gold that they used in the game was. And we'll go over that as we go farther down. But this was pretty much used by every faction because it was free. And you absolutely wanted to buy every card that you could in your provinces every turn. And so the free cards meant you didn't have to pay gold for them. You just had to work out everything else. Sneak attack. So this basically lets you take the first battle action. If you're the attack, you take the first battle action of a battle. Typically, the way it worked is the defender got the first battle action. Sneak attack basically said, no, as the attacker, I'm going to take the first battle action. And it was because the way the game was set up, I take an action, you take an action. It swung tempo back to you because you got the first battle action. Now you control the flow of the battle. Stables was the unicorn clan holding. Strength purity. So this was the other force bonus that I was mentioning. +3/+3 to any person with personal honor greater than 2. So 3 personal honor or greater. Matsugohei could play it. He had 3 personal honor. And Otaku Komoko could play it. She had 3 personal honor. So Komoko would be a 7-force cavalry unit with 5 chi. And between charge and strength of purity and the lion stronghold, it was very easy for Gohei to get to 9 or higher. So summon undead champion. So this basically, you could blow up a spell to make a 5-force 2 chi undead personality, which in those days was very powerful. You had to bow the Shugenja, destroy the spell, and lose 4 honor. Still, that's big enough with a little bit of help to just take a province. So as far as our terrain destroyer, superior tactics was the end-all be-all for destroying terrains. Now you had to have personalities in the battle with chi 3 or higher, and you could either use this to move a personality from one battlefield to another or destroy a terrain. 90% of the time I saw this played to destroy a terrain. The other 10% was move a personality from this province to another one. But it was very versatile. It was printed through Gold Edition, and then it was put on ice for a while, and it didn't come back until 20 festivals, when you honestly didn't need the ability to blow up a terrain anymore because of what they had done with terrains. Now the strongholds. Lion was 6 province strength, 3 gold production, the lowest of any clan, and 6 starting honor. Bow to give Lion personality +2 force bonus for attacking until the end of the turn. So this is why Gohei was 3 force for 2 gold, because you weren't going to, most of the time you weren't buying them for honor. He gets +2 force while attacking, so it goes from a 1 force to a 3 force, 5 force with the ancestral home, and he either a charge or a strength purity put him to 8. That's every stronghold in the game except including the crab one. But as you'll see, the crab one had a nice defensive mechanism. The crane themed house was 5 province strength, 4 gold production, 5 starting honor, limited bow to gain 2 honor. This is another Douglas Schuler art. Another one of his famous pieces in the game. This was beautiful. Straight up honor runner. That's what they wanted to do. Test of honor. Another easy, well, I won't say easy way, but a potential way to destroy personalities. 6 gold, and your opponent got to do. Basically, they get to reveal the top card of their Dynasty deck. If the focus value is greater than the honor of the personality is dishonored and then is destroyed. And they also lose the card that was revealed. So the Egapanku was a mistake, and apparently they originally tested it as a item, and then they changed it to a strategy very late, and they left the item frame on it for Imperial Edition by accident. So basically it copies any personality in play. This is a card that you'll see in story. Later on, that does some very powerful things, but being able to copy your opponent's best personality is really good, even if it is 9 gold. This was later corrected in future expansions to our future reprints as a 9 gold strategy. The Jade Hand. So this was another powerful artifact or attachment. So it's +1 force, +3 chi, 8 gold. Cannot be stolen or destroyed, so you couldn't take it with Ninja Thief. And the personality gets +3 force, +2 chi if they're opposing a Shadowlands. Jade is a weakness of Shadowlands. This card will eventually go onto a particular personality as their destiny becomes more clear. Mount Keep of the Dragon, another Matthew D. Wilson. 5 province strength, 4 gold production, 4 starting honor. When you lose a province, each of your remaining provinces each get +2 strength. So your first province is 5 strength. The second one that gets after the first one gets destroyed, the second one is 7. All of them are 7 strength. After that one a new one gets destroyed, they all become 9 strength, and then the last one's 11 strength. So that, even though it wasn't the most powerful stronghold of the group, it still was a mountain to slog through. Togashi Mitsu. So this was another poster child. Small for stat line, but he had the ability to gain up to 5 +1/+1 fire tokens. And after that particular battle, he bows and cannot straighten until all the fire tokens come off. But literally can become a 7/7 for 5 gold, even if he's locked down for a couple turns afterwards. Gives you an advantage, but that artwork was what stood out with him. Togashi Yokune is the clan champion of the Dragon Clan. He's one of the few personalities at the time that had both the samurai and shugenja traits. He's very powerful and very mysterious, and is another one that we'll have stories to tell later on about how deep his power goes. So this is the character that had been memed. Toku was simple 0-1, 0 gold, 2 personal arm on a line samurai. He was the character that was typically eaten by Oni no Subaru because he was free and didn't matter what your honor was at. He was also used a lot to lobby for the Imperial favor because he didn't have any force. The L5R community rallied around this character, trying to make him something more than Oni fodder. And eventually, he lasted for a long time in the story and in the game as a honorable personality. He died, if I remember correctly, at some point in Diamond Edition, and died a hero, which a peasant raising themselves to samurai status was not something that was done often, but had been done. So it was a very cool story. Torrential Rain is basically the spell version of Entrapping Terrain, but for Shugenja. Touch of Death was another powerful spell. 8 gold was a lot, but bowing the Shugenja, destroy the spell to destroy a bowed personality was still pretty good. This is the Unicorn Stronghold. Provincial Estates with 6 province strength, 5 gold production, 4 honor, personal honor. Open bow to give any one of your cards the cavalry trait until the end of the turn. So this basically lets you change a non-cavalry card to a cavalry card. Most of the personalities and followers that you'd play were already all cavalry, so this was probably the weakest of the abilities that were given out to strongholds. But if you were playing a sealed or something of that nature back in those days, you might not have gotten everybody that was cavalry, so this actually gave you an out to fix that. We went through the Sacred Temple. War Fortress of the Crab. 7 province strength, 4 gold production, 3 starting honor. Bow to add +3 strength to any one province until end of turn. This action may be performed in a battle in which you have no units. So you can make any one province, strength province, 10 until end of turn. This stronghold became the anti-blitz stronghold of the format, and is one reason why Crab was ended up winning the first World Championships. Because this ability basically meant you're not, until I'm ready to let you take a province, you're not taking a province. The Void Dragon, this was the most powerful of the dragons, and the reason why is because if this destroyed a province, you had to discard, your opponent had to discard his hand. Ooh, brother, was that painful. Walking the Way was the tutor of the format. This was the other Quentin Hoover piece of artwork I wanted to show. Still a beautiful piece of artwork. But you got to bow your Shugenja and destroy the spell and search your deck for a fate deck for a card and put it in your hand. His tutor effects were always really strong. Water Dragon lets you copy the ability of any Shugenja, which was pretty good. Yasuki Taka. This guy was just for the memes, but he was also a player with one of our secret organizations later. And lastly, we come to one of the villains. Yogo Junzo was originally a Scorpion Clan Shugenju. The Yogo family was destined to destroy the thing that they loved the most, a curse, if you will. Yogo Junzo happened to love the Empire the most. When he was the Yogo clan daimyo, and so when his master, when his clan champion Shoju was killed, he became distraught and stumbled upon one of the Black Scrolls, which you see him opening here. Each of the Black Scrolls were basically dark magic spells that had locked away a certain entity, and for each one of those, the scrolls that were open, more of the power of this dark entity was released into the world. Junzo actually died opening the first scroll, which was the wasting disease, and that is actually what the plague was that was spreading across Rokugan. As you can see by the undead and Shugenja trait. Alright, so that is a walkthrough of the important cards, both in gameplay wise as well as story wise, in Imperial Edition. I want to thank you guys for staying with me. I realize this is a long video. I'm hoping to cut down some of the other videos in size from what this one is. But I think it's important to get the base functionality of what we're doing here as we move into each successful set. Check back with me next week as we go over the history of expansion number 2, Shadowlands. Until next time, there is no escape from the tiger.